Nothing in this podcast or on our website should be construed as medical advice. Consult your healthcare provider for your individual nutritional and medical needs. The information presented is based on our research and is strictly that of the author and not necessarily those of any professional group or other individual.
Hi, I'm Sue Becker from Bread Beckers. Welcome to Sue's Healthy Minutes. I'm so excited you've joined me today, and I hope this episode encourages you and allows you to find the answers you have been praying for the health of you and your family. Today on Sue's Healthy Minutes, it's my birthday week. It's been 34 years since I received my life-changing gift of an in-home grain mill from my husband, Brad. Not only did this simple change in our diets of adding real bread to our table change the physical health of our family, but also the whole trajectory of our life. Life is certainly a journey, and as I look back over my life, I see God's hand leading and guiding us each step along the way. I recently had the wonderful honor of sharing at the Faith and Medicine Conference held in Beaufort, Georgia. Today, I will share a recording of that short presentation, which is a small glimpse of how God has used our ministry over the years, from its humble beginnings in our home to our mission work around the world. John 15:16 tells us that God has chosen and appointed us to bear fruit that will last. And early on in this real bread journey, God spoke a word to me from Isaiah 61 that He had anointed me to proclaim liberty to the captives, both physical and spiritual. I cannot begin to express my gratitude to each and every one of you that share your It's the Bread story and newfound physical freedom testimony with me. It is a blessing beyond words. And to now be used by God to proclaim spiritual freedom to those held captive is above and beyond what I could have ever imagined. I hope you will be blessed today as you hear my story. Some of it might be familiar to you, but I encourage you to listen all the way to the end for a powerful testimony of healing and freedom. So I want to thank you for listening today. I'm so grateful that God called me forth from my mother's womb 70 years ago. Yeah, 70. So be blessed today as you go forth in your own journey. And until next time, this is Sue Becker from Bread Beckers with Sue's Healthy Minutes. It is such a privilege and honor to be here. I recognize some faces, and those of you that know me know that it's harder for me to speak for 20 minutes than it is for me to speak for 3.5 hours. So I told them that I will not walk around today when I speak. I'm usually quite dramatic. I'm going to stick to my notes. I do have notes, but very large print. So because I feel like I'm chained a little bit because I don't want to take away from what Pastor Jamie's going to share. I'm going to share, I hope today, well, first of all, I want to thank you for allowing me to be here. I so identified with someone that's taken over probably 20 mission trips. I feel today that I came to bring a message, but I've already been more blessed than the message I have to bring to you. But I do want to share a testimony that I hope will bring you both hope and encouragement. You know, everyone in here, we all have loved ones. We all have friends, probably, possibly even ourselves that are facing serious health issues and challenges. And perhaps it's just our children, not just our children, who seem to be chronically sick, snotty noses, stuffy noses, ear infections, constant trips to the doctor. Or maybe we have common complaints such as bowel issues, sinus congestion, acid reflux. Am I speaking to anybody in here this morning? Yeah, go ahead and raise your hand. And I understand. I've been there. And for years, I struggled with many of these same common complaints. But in 1991, 34 years ago, I learned that it didn't have to be that way. My husband Brad and I will celebrate 50 years of marriage this year. We have raised 9 children. We have our 19th grandchild on the way. And this year I will become a great grandma, which I'm very, very excited about. But in 1991, I was introduced to a healthy eating concept that radically changed my life, changed my health, and the health of my family. Through a medical publication, I learned that grains are the most nutrient, or one of the most nutrient-dense foods groups that God has given us. It goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 29. He gave us 2 kinds of plants, ones that bear fruit and vegetables and ones that bear seed. And those were given to us for food. But only when they are cooked whole and eaten whole or freshly milled into flour do they retain all of their nutritional benefits. Because what you need to understand, grains are storable. Left whole and intact, they retain their nutritional value. In this journal, I learned that most of the common diseases that plague Americans today can be traced back to our overconsumption of commercially processed flour and flour products. And I learned that the enrichment of flour and even other food products that we see in the grocery store is not a favor that food companies are doing to us, but a small replacement of the multitude of vitamins and minerals that are lost in flour when they sift the bran and germ portions away. With my degree in food science, which I did graduate from the University of Georgia with a degree in food science, and after graduation, I continued to study. I loved physiology. I loved biochemistry. I loved studying healthy eating. I actually headed to University of Georgia as a pre-med student and realized I really preferred to be a wife and a mother, and I accomplished that goal. But not saying you can't be a doctor and be a wife and a mother, but that wasn't the plan for my life. And I did spend a quarter in pharmacy school and went, that's not really what I want to do either. So I ended up in food science and worked for Kraft Foods for almost 5 years, or I think as we call them, the beast, I think I heard someone say. But anyway, with my degree in food science, when I learned this information and my background, my passion, because I continued to study after graduating with physiology and biochemistry, I'm like, why didn't I learn this? How did I miss this in food science? How did I miss what they were doing to our flour and the severe ramifications that it could have on our health? So I was convinced. It was biblically sound information because it was a Christian publication and it was scientifically founded. I knew it was real. So I purchased an in-home, well, actually my husband gave me one for my birthday. I tell all husbands and guys, you can give your wife this for your birthday. They'll love it. And I began to mill all of my own flour and make all of my own bread. Muffins, pancakes, no white flour came into my house anymore. I'm a real all or nothing kind of person. And I had tried whole wheat flour before, but it was nasty. If you've ever bought the stuff from the store, anybody ever bought it? If you haven't, don't. It's gross. It's nasty. You won't make a nice fluffy loaf of bread or a muffin or anything your children will eat with straight store-bought whole wheat flour. But I didn't care. I'm like, I don't care. If we have to choke this down, we're going to eat it. And that was kind of my thought. So when the mill came in my home, I couldn't wait. I took it out, I milled some flour, and I made some of the most delicious bread that we had ever eaten. And the health benefits to me personally were very immediate. I made bread. I wonder if I can say this. Dr. Bergeron's out. Okay. I made bread, I ate bread, and I pooped the next morning. Woo! This was amazing. It was glorious. So, and then even in the first day, and y'all are already going, she's crazy. But let me just say this. I already had 5 young children at the time when I started in this journey, and I homeschooled the children. So I was a busy mom. And so adding this in was an undertaking for me, but it was so worth it because again, like I said, first day constipation done, I began to notice I have more energy. And when you have that many children, you notice whether you have more energy or not. But by the the end of the first month, I saw my constipation go and my energy levels. But listen, my sugar cravings disappeared. My constant, frequent, chronic headaches gone. My dependence on antihistamines. I grew up in South Georgia, and I thought postnasal drip was the way God made me. That was just my cross I had to bear. And I'm like, I guess compared to what others are bearing, I'll take this. Gone. I can stand here today and tell you I've not had an antihistamine or a decongestant of any kind since 1991, and I used to live on them before this. So this was amazing to me. I have a wart story. You'll have to go to my podcast to hear those. One of my children's warts went away, and I knew it was the bread because I'd studied it. And then I just began to notice the health of my children. They weren't sickly kids, but we certainly seemed to catch everything that went around. And by the time you go through a family as large as ours, by the time the next bug comes around, we're just finishing the first one. They didn't have ear infections and no more snotty noses. And I can tell every mother in here that your child does not have to be snotty nosed from the ages of 18 months to like 3 years. It just doesn't have to be that way. So not to mention, like I said already, the bread was delicious. It still is delicious. This was healthy food my whole family loved and would enjoy. I didn't have to coerce them to eat and drink the things that I would eat and drink. Just eat your bread, you know. And so this was exciting to me. I became very excited, and I began to share my bread with everyone I saw and make bread for other people, every church event. And the next thing I know, I see bread makers in here. There's a few of you. Raise your hand. As soon as you make bread for somebody, what's the first thing they ask you to do? Will you make bread for me? And you go, yeah, sure, I will, because that's just the way you are. So the next thing I knew, I was making bread for everybody, making bread for my family. And on one day in 1992, after I was weary for making bread from all these people that were coming to my house to buy bread and making it for my family, I'll never forget this day. I met my husband in our driveway as he drove up from work. And I know the Lord spoke these words to me and put them in my heart. And I said to him, I do not think I'm supposed to make bread for the world. I think I'm supposed to teach the world to make bread for themselves with a customer base of 4. That was my world at that time. And so that's what I told my husband, and Bread Beckers was born that day on the driveway in my carport in 1992. And in our little 1,300 square foot house that we still live in today. But it grew from simply the testimonies of other people. And by 1998, we had outgrown our home and what my husband and our then 6 children could do. And so we incorporated with a longtime friend and partner, and we moved into, and today we occupy about 23,000 square feet between 2 warehouses in Woodstock, Georgia. So come see us. But we're one of the largest grain packaging facilities in the southeastern United States. Within a week of starting our business, I won't go into this too much, but the Lord gave us a vision of being like Joseph, to supply his people with grain when the public needs it. Be very careful believing all of the anti-grain, anti-wheat propaganda that's out there, because grains are storable, and there may come a day when it may be the most reliable, the only reliable food that we have. And that's why God gave us those 2 types of food. But anyway, we are a full-fledged kitchen store offering kitchen equipment, bulk grains and beans. We have co-ops all over the United States, and we have a studio kitchen where we teach cooking classes in person, or we live stream them, and we have a YouTube channel with all kinds of classes already there. And in 2022, I started my own podcast where I do a lot of in-depth teaching, and we have lots of interviews with what we call It's the Bread stories, because that's what began to happen. People would come to me and share their stories of how the bread had changed their life, and their comments would be, it's the bread, it's got to be the bread. That's all I've changed. And so over the past 33 years, we've seen countless lives changed and health improved. And from this one simple change, we call it real bread, because it's the only thing that is real bread. And as people shared their stories, we call them It's the Bread stories. I would search through my physiology and biochemistry books, trying to figure out and find out what was in this bread that would make someone's cholesterol drop 85 to 100 points in just 1 month. And their words, all I changed was the bread. It's got to be the bread. Or to stabilize someone's blood sugar. It's the bread, they would tell me. Or correct irritable bowel syndrome in 2 to 3 weeks. Totally normalized.
people that were housebound, could not leave their home, could not sleep for the night for getting up to go to the bathroom. And yet Real Bread, in a matter of 5 days to 2 weeks, corrected. This was amazing. And so as I pulled out my physiology and biochemistry books and studied, now you can see why I can talk like 3.5 hours on bread. People come to my seminars and they're like, my wife drugged me here and I didn't know how in the world you were going to talk this long. I can do it. Believe me, I can do it. I encourage you, if you want to hear more, go to our YouTube channel. There's a video there called Real Bread, the Staff of Life. Jesus compared himself to bread for a reason. But I learned it's all there. It's all ingrained, the perfect food that God has given us. And I just encourage you to look into it a little bit more. But here's what I want to share with you mostly today. As I begin to travel and speak, I begin to meet more and more chronically ill people. Some very serious and some just constipated, just mean and grumpy. But anyway, but also I begin to meet more and more people. It is an investment. You buy a grain mill and a mixer or something and grain, but it's food. But I begin to meet more and more people who were chronically ill, but who literally, realistically could not afford the financial investment. A lot of us say we can't. Most of us can. But there were some who couldn't, or I met people who physically, they were enabled to physically make the bread. And so my heart was broken as I began to see these people because I wanted to say, just buy a grain mill and make your bread. And so I started a ministry called Real Bread Outreach in 2007. And this was to come alongside families to educate them and to help meet the personal needs. If it was a machine or bread, we joined church food banks. We had a bakery at one time. We don't anymore. So that enabled us to help food banks by providing this. And so our outreach really continued locally until 2016. In January of 2016, in my daily Bible reading, I came across the scripture, Ecclesiastes 11, verse 1. And it said, cast your bread on many waters, and after many days, it will come back to you. Now, somebody in here already said, I didn't need something else to do. I was quite busy. I now had 7 children, and I think we had even adopted 2 at that point anyway. But my youngest 3 children they had completed high school. My youngest daughter was about to be married. So I was, fixing to not be a full-time mom anymore or you're always a mom, but not have those full-time demands on my life. But now Bread Beckers was keeping me busy. Like I said, I didn't really need any more to do, but the Lord just put those words in my heart. And I remember writing in my prayer journal that day, what waters? And I circled them. Be careful what you ask. 10 days later, I get an email from a customer saying there are 3 Haitian pastors that want to speak to you about bringing bread to Haiti. They all had ministries in Haiti. They had orphanages. And they had schools, all of them. Many, many, many of the children coming to school starving. You can't learn if you're starving. They did not have the funds to prepare them full meals. One of them had heard me speak on grains being the most nutrient-dense food God has given us, and they thought maybe we could at least make this bread. And so I made my first trip. Pastor Jamie, this is his heart of a pastor. I called him. I said, I need to ask you a favor. And he goes, yes. And I'm like, I haven't asked you yet. And he goes, whatever it is, yes. And we'd only been going to the church a couple of years. And I said, well, someone wants me to come to Haiti. He goes, okay, we'll go. So several weeks later, him and my husband and his son and I went to Haiti and made my first trip. I made 15 trips in the matter of 3 years to train 3 teams of bread makers to mill their own grain and make their own bread. And they supplied this bread for the kids that live in the orphanage and then the school children. For many of these children, this was all they were getting in a day. Some of them would wrap it up in a napkin and put it in their pocket to save it for later so that their stomach wouldn't be hungry and gnawing for them to go to bed. In 2019, we were able to build a bakery in Gonaïves, Haiti, that is still thriving today and feeding the community and is much needed source of food and a little income in the troubled times of Haiti. We continue to ship wheat and supplies to 2 locations in Haiti that are together feeding over 1,000 school children and orphans every day. Real Bread Outreach, we've helped train bakers in Uganda, Israel, Tanzania. We supplied equipment for missionaries and ministries in Japan, Kenya, Israel, the U.S., and just recently, the Philippines. But in 2021, I made my first trip to Tanzania, Africa, to help establish a bakery there. We worked with Christ Laborers Church and Pastor Vincent Komba in Visiga, Tanzania. Pastor Vincent founded a discipleship school called the Potter Center. He had a heart to raise up disciples and pastors and evangelists through an intensive study program to go into some of the most remote villages and darkest places of Tanzania, places that most missionary trips aren't going to reach. And so this was an exciting thing for us to be able to help. The bakery today is a vital part of Christ Laborers Church and the Potter Center to feed the students and the community and those in need. Many of these students have found Jesus Christ from witchcraft and just dark places, have never heard of Jesus or the Bible. And so they get trained so that they can go out and speak to and evangelize. But we learned just last year in the fall, we learned that some of these pastors were going out. These are very remote villages, very dark places, very poor places. There's no job there. Many of them sleeping on the ground with their families, many of them not having food to eat. In fact, Pastor Jamie came home one time and said one of them had come back and said, I hadn't eaten in 7 days. Real Bread Outreach, we said, this cannot happen. So we started a feeding program last year. The feeding program, we supply them with corn, wheat, rice, beans, some sugar, and oil. Every month for $25 a month, we can supply each person with that much food. And today we're feeding about 100 people a month. There's 25 pastors and their families. And so that's very exciting, but the number's going to continue to grow. If you'd like to be a part of that, you can pick up some Real Bread Outreach information at the back table. On our last trip to Tanzania this past June with Pastor Jamie, we got to meet some of the pastors that we were feeding, and one of them very emotionally looked at us and he said, I was starving and I never thought anybody would think to do this, to supply me with food. And now I don't have to worry about where my children are going to get food. I can evangelize and preach the gospel. And I thought that day, Jesus, when he was asked, when did we ever see you hungry? When did we ever see you thirsty? And he said, whatever you've done unto the least of these. But in the summer of 2021, on my second trip to Tanzania, I've been 3 times now to continue the bread training, I was asked to come pray for a young lady who desperately needed prayer and healing. She was a college student, but they had brought her to Visiga, to Christ Laborers Church, to Pastor Vincent, because she had excruciating pain in her back and she could not walk even. They carried her in and sat her down in Pastor Vincent's living room, and I was called down from the bakery to come and help them pray for her. While praying and seeking the Lord as to how to pray for her, the Holy Spirit directed me and said that she was being gossiped about, as if someone was stabbing her in her back. That's what God showed me. The girl confirmed that this was indeed happening. I had no way of knowing. I'd never met this girl or spoken to this girl besides she did speak English, but we led her in forgiveness towards the offenders and broke all agreement with the power of the lies that had been spoken over her. Pastor Vincent then helped her up and she walked with a very distinctive limp, but she walked. So over the course of the next week, she could walk, very distinctive limp. I saw her off and on throughout the week, but on the last day of my trip, I knew that I wanted to pray for her again. I felt our work in prayer was not quite done. I felt a little like Jesus. What are you seeing? Well, I'm seeing trees that look like people. Well, let's try again until you see people. So I just felt like that I needed to pray with her, felt a real burden for her. And the team had to go to some meetings, and I said, I don't want to go. I want to stay behind. She could speak English, so I didn't need a translator. Now, I had been training in deliverance ministry for over 2 years. So I was armed and ready. I thought, I got the tools. I got the protocol. I know what to do. So I started our prayer time by asking Jesus what he wanted to set her free from. She immediately just started saying, I will never leave you or forsake you. I will never leave you or forsake you. I will never leave you or forsake you. And I'm like, this is not going according to my protocol. This is not going according to my plan. And but she just kept saying it. I will never leave you or forsake you. And the Holy Spirit helped me to discern what was going on. What I realized, the reasons she was saying that was because she didn't believe. She was struggling to believe that Jesus would indeed never leave her or forsake her. So we prayed against that lie of the enemy and the strongholds of fear and unbelief. Mind you, our prayer time was about 10 minutes max. The next thing I know, we were jumping and dancing and praising God, and she was running all around the room. I want you to understand, we never prayed for her healing in that moment. We broke the lies of the enemy of fear and unbelief, and she was set free. 10 minutes. She then walked with me about a half a mile down the road, and I could have shown that video too, singing and dancing, but there was another lady down the road that I wanted to pray for before I left, and she spoke English, so she could be my translator. And the three of us then walked a half a mile. It was at least a half a mile back to Pastor Vincent's house, and several women were gathered there and overjoyed to see her walking and praising God. She demonstrated for all to see her answer to prayer. Her name is Zion. There are so many stories that I could tell but this is probably one of my favorites. Pastor Jamie's going to tell you some others. But, when I said to my husband, Brad, 33 years ago, that I was not supposed to make bread for the world, but to teach the world to make bread for themselves, I had no idea. I had a customer base of 4. How many of y'all start a business with a customer base of 4? That was my world. And today, I literally am teaching others around the world to make bread for themselves. So my encouragement to you today is to do whatever God is putting on your heart, and do not despise the small beginnings. You never know where it's going to lead. And for your healing, do not be afraid to think outside the box for healing, not just alternative medicine, but as surely as we are physical beings, we are spiritual beings as well. We cannot afford to overlook the spiritual dimension to healing. I have my own testimony of that, of being healed from cancer, and it's pretty dynamic. In Africa and beyond, it is typically the starting point. Most of the time, in fact, Dr. Bergeron laughed. He came to visit our church when Pastor Vincent was here one time, and he goes, I got sick one time, and I kept going to the doctor, and they finally told me, go to your church, have them pray for you. The doctor said that. Wouldn't we love that? But so we've got to think. In America, it's more subtle. I've been in deliverance where I've seen them slither on the floor like a snake. But this was not that way. 10 minutes. We didn't ask for healing. We just asked God to set her free. Since that trip to Tanzania and witnessing this healing, I often think of the story of David and Goliath. You all know it. David's father, Jesse, sent David to the battlefield with bread. But while he was there, he killed a giant. And I just love that. So I went to Tanzania to teach them how to make bread. But while I was there, God used me to kill a giant and bring healing to a very beautiful young lady. Her dream was to finish college and join the military. And today, she is fulfilling that dream because God set her free. Amen.
Sue's Healthy Minutes podcast has been a presentation by the Bread Beckers Incorporated, located in Woodstock, Georgia. For more information, store hours, and learning opportunities, visit breadbeckers.com and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to this podcast and never miss an episode. Share this with 2 friends who would benefit from this information, and be sure to join us again next week for more of Sue's Healthy Minutes.